Andy, community engagement is more than just business buzz. It's about evolving from a workplace to a great place and helping employees make a connection and impact in the communities where they work and live. Andy is proud of the brand he has helped build and of the trust and partnership garnered from leadership teams. He's gratified that community engagement has become truly a strategic pillar. All about innovation, Andy continually strives to take his efforts to the next level, delivering humanitarian support to employees and communities impacted by disaster. Through strong relationships with organizations active in disaster, he has positioned AT&T to be recognized as best in class, delivering results for communities in need. And he's going to share his secrets to success around disaster response with us today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And first, I really appreciate everybody attending the B7 conference today. It's really nice to kind of be back and collaborative in the community. It's really nice to see everybody, and hopefully you've taken advantage and met some new people today, had some great conversations. So I just want to say thank you for attending as a B-Civic board member. Thank you for attending the conference, and again, hopefully you'll be back again and attend some more events that we host. As Karen mentioned, I'm Andy. I lead AT&T's humanitarian disaster response. My goal for this conversation today is that I share best practice. By no means am I an expert. I am learning as we go. And I think, you know, our kind of crossroads conversation and the kind of the theme of this meeting really, you know, it impacts me or means something to me, because as I think about this, it is always evolving. All of our jobs and all of our areas of responsibility do, but I'm always learning. Each disaster is new and offers some new kind of challenges and learning. And so hopefully I can share some with you that are meaningful and that you can take back, but I'd love this to be a conversation too. And so I will start with disasters are not far from all of us. I'm curious, share or not share, how many have been impacted by a disaster personally? Okay, well, and pandemic aside, well, I hope if, you know, those of you who have been impacted by disaster, that your path to recovery was a short one, or you got the resources that you needed to help shrink that time between disaster and recovery. Another show of hands from folks in this room, how many of you have led your company's response to a disaster? Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. Yes, yes, thank you, Red Cross. I'm curious, you know, how many have heard the adage, every disaster is different and unique, no disaster is the same? Nodding heads. And that is a cliche that when I started this role, literally almost 5 years ago, I got a call from my leader early December saying, hey, my boss is going to call you in about 10 minutes. You're going to have a new job. Don't really know what it is or what it entails, but it's around disasters. I think it's going to be fun. Okay. And so when I talk about crossroads, and no matter where you're at in this journey, just know that you will learn at a faster pace than probably you're ready for. But I think, you know, when you talk to folks at Red Cross, you talk to, and I'll share this later, but use your resources and ask a lot of questions. No question is dumb. No question is something that the Red Cross or others have not heard before, and they're willing to share, and they're great partners. So just know that, you know, when I talk about the histories and the pivot of this work, our focus area, you know, how to identify what to bring to the table, on script, off script, a lot of times most of them are off script, and then our partner evolution. Just know that where we started at AT&T was literally this phone call after hurricanes Harvey, Irma, and Maria. And Leadership was not happy with AT&T's response. It's kind of all over the place. Lots of hero makers, lots of people doing the right things for the right reasons, but a lot of overlap, not a lot of efficiency, not a lot of communication. And so they said, hey, go figure this out. We need to have more charging stations in shelters of last resort. Go figure that out, Andy. And that was my starting point. So no matter where you're at this journey, know that through every disaster, through questions, through just relationships, you will learn and you'll continue to learn throughout this process. Disasters are a growth industry, unfortunately. As Michael can attest, there are more, or Mitchell, I'm sorry, Mitchell. There are more disasters happening now than there were 5 years ago. Next year probably will be the same. It's just an upward curve. And so this is just this year through September, actually October 11th. So there have been $15 billion weather and climate disasters. Some are not on anybody's radar. Probably some of these, obviously Hurricane Ian, certainly. A derecho. Anybody knows what a derecho is? What's a derecho? It is an inland hurricane, same kind of winds. Are you a Midwesterner? Yes. So I will say when you're in this field, you probably watch more Weather Channel and follow NOAA and some like FEMA and some of those other things than you really should. My family, I joke that I could walk into any retirement home and have a conversation with people about the weather any day of the week. Right now, there are 2 tropical storms happening. One is on the Atlantic, one is in the Gulf. There's a volcano that's starting to rumble in Hawaii. So there is never, I like to say disasters are a bully. You don't know when they're coming. They don't care about birthdays. They don't care about holidays, weekends. They do love weekends. Yes. But this is just an example of just, again, 15 so far billion-dollar disasters that have happened through October 11th. Annual average from 80 to 21, 7.7. Most recent years, last 5, over 17. Again, it's growing, and it's something that, as most of us know, we're not too far away from a disaster. I was just talking to a gentleman back here from Alpine Bank up in the mountains. So far, Summit County has been okay, but we all know how close we are to wildfire and how unpredictable they can be. So one thing I want you to leave with is that disasters are going to happen. It's just how we are prepared, how much we think about it, and how much you can be flexible and rely on those relationships. From an AT&T perspective, so we saw $15 billion disasters. So far this year, I have responded to over 27 disasters. And those are natural disasters. Also domestic man-made events, unfortunately Uvalde and Buffalo. And we are a global company. So Ukraine crisis or conflict or war. And then there's a drought in Mexico that's impacting our employees. They don't have running water. They don't have facilities at work. So that's another area. And all of these disasters are different, and our response is different to each and every one of these. When I think about and I'll share examples, but first and foremost, when I look through a checklist in the disaster kind of life cycle and what we're going to respond to, first and foremost is, are employees impacted? With AT&T, again, we're a global company, so there's a lot of places that our employees work and live, in the neighborhoods that their families live in. So I wanted to mention this, and this is not under my purview, but this is our AT&T Employee Relief Fund. Most people have disaster funds depending on the size and scale of your company, right? So AT&T we used to have a disaster relief fund that was tied into FEMA. And FEMA would have to declare a disaster before we could deliver funds to our employees. We changed it. And so that resonates. And sometimes they don't, right? And especially when employees have smaller events, or they're not small to them, a fire, a flood, something that happens to them and the small community maybe that they work in, but maybe it's just their home. So we opened up and we started our own nonprofit, which is the AT&T Employee Relief Fund. And so when I think about disasters, first and foremost, it's our own people. How are our own people impacted, and how can we get them back on their feet so that they can start rebuilding their lives and begin the path to recovery, and then help our customers do the same. So I wanted to share with the Employee Relief Fund. If anybody has specific questions about the ERF and what it does and the journey, I think it's probably 4 years, 5 years old. And there was a lot of conversation about how to do it, and do you outsource it? Do you bring it in-house? So if anybody has questions, I'm happy to take that offline and share that information with you, and share the context so that you can learn more about it. So when we talk about the life cycle of disaster, and I talk about the 3 R's, but really it's resiliency and preparedness, immediate relief, some say recovery, rescue, recovery, and then long-term recovery. There are organizations, many organizations, that find themselves in sometimes multiple parts of this wheel, but certainly at least one. Red Cross, I would say probably resiliency and preparedness, immediate relief or rescue, and then short-term recovery. If you are looking at and you're thinking about your own programs, and where you want to focus on that life cycle, there are plenty of organizations that will fall under that umbrella. And I like to say, think about when you're thinking about your programs with disaster response and recovery, what does your company do well? What is your DNA? And go from that and that jumping point to how you build your program. We started, again, like I said, Andy, go figure out how we can get charging stations and shelters of last resort, which was great. Fine. What else can we do? I will tell you also the start was, and what I inherited, the culture was, let's write a check. And that's okay too. There are times when writing a check makes sense. When I'm looking at different events, like on the Alaska typhoon, it impacted the western part of Alaska. If anybody knows what happened or anybody familiar. So epic storm, just devastated on the western side of Alaska. Cut off communities, no communication. We don't have any employees there. We don't have any facilities or infrastructure there. But it was important to our stakeholders that we responded. So in that case, and we don't have a lot of employees to volunteer, you're not going to send a lot of volunteers out there. So in that case, we wrote a check. But in many other cases, we deploy our assets and our resources. And when I think about AT&T, our first, like I said, our DNA is communications. That's the biggest thing. And so outside of my purview, we have a group called the Network Disaster Recovery Team. Anybody see some images from Hurricane Ian that might have shown AT&T's involvement? So our Network Disaster Recovery Team is learning. Every disaster, you learn more. You go back and you say, okay, what could we have done better? What were the things that we missed? What were the areas that were gaps? And one of them, and I didn't bring a video of it, but was access to areas and communities that are cut off due to water. So they built an amphibious vehicle. And so you'll see, if you Google AT&T Hurricane Ian, our NDR team has this vehicle And I joke that whoever got to drive it across to Sanibel Island, it made their career. But they put communications equipment to deliver communications and rebuild communications on Sanibel Island because the recovery was just getting started and they were literally cut off, figuratively, physically, and also through communications. All of our communications were down, and same with our competitors. And so they literally took this amphibious vehicle filled with equipment across the Gulf into to Sanibel Island and to deliver communications equipment so they could start the path to recovery. So when I talk about assets, I look at building a toolkit and adding how can I add value for our company? How can I add value for our my stakeholders? And I say, each disaster I learn, like I said, the amphibious vehicle, that's one thing, but now, and charging stations, again, charging stations was first, but now I have a new I build my assets, I build my toolkit, because again, each disaster is different. We have a text to give program. It was something that was already part of AT&T and part of the toolkit, but it wasn't really activated during disasters. So I work with organizations like Red Cross. Red Cross already has a text to give with Mobile Giving Foundation, but we help amplify it so that those delivering rescue and relief can get support to help the community get back on its feet faster. But I'll also talk to smaller organizations who are local, who need help just as much, and who don't have those resources. So again, that's one way, and we use our social media assets to amplify. So again, when you think about what you have already in your toolkit, some of these things are already there. Text to give for American Red Cross, Salvation Army, other organizations. If you have social media, if you have those tools, you can activate them and send it out to your network, your communities, to help them deliver support. I think about when I first started, you are just responding. And as you kind of mature and as you get more experience, you can start taking time to think about and evaluate and ask questions. So with American Red Cross, those are the questions I have. How else can we help? What are other ways that we can support? What are other ways that we can get involved? There's other organizations that are out there that you'd be surprised by their answers. Sometimes they'll just say, you know what, Andy, we need headcount, we need sweat equity. And that was where I got started, with sweat equity. A year after Hurricane Harvey, we activated employees in Houston to engage in building projects, rebuilding projects. That was, again, just part of who we already had employee engagement opportunities, and so let's get employees out there and let's start rebuilding. That was great. Pandemic hit. So then that sweat equity support goes away. Throughout those, though, I was having conversations with this organization. I'll share more about them in a moment. But they had they had resources that they wanted to share with the vulnerable populations, vulnerable communities that they serve. And so had a conversation with our tech dev team, and we helped build an app with them. But it's, again, just thinking about what subject matter expertise you have on your teams, in your business, and asking questions both from the partner and then also your own teams. What are ways that we can help you that aren't just visible right now or just easily, writing a check? One other thing too that I want to mention, you'll be surprised about where support comes from. There was a flood in Pakistan earlier this year. Anybody? I see some. but it was epic. It was literally, there was a lake in the middle of the country where there shouldn't be a lake. And you're right, no one heard about it. We don't have any employees there. We don't have business there. But we have employees who are of Pakistani descent, born there, have family who still live there, so they care about it. So we have a giving platform. I would assume most people have a giving platform that they share with their employees. So ours is Benevity. And we had a leader who was asking, what is AT&T doing in Pakistan? Again, my answer was, well, it doesn't meet any of the kind of criteria that we normally would respond, and we don't have any assets to respond there, except for one, which was our giving page. And so we started a giving page for Pakistan Relief. We focused on 2 organizations that we could give to through that platform. And that actually, to date, this year, is the highest employee giving program that we've had, or campaign that we've had. So again, when you think about your toolkit, it's more diverse than you would even think. Something as simple as using your social media to tweet out, a text to give campaign, or your giving platform to do some employee giving in response to a disaster that is far beyond your borders. I want this to be a conversation, so I don't want to just keep on talking. Any comments, thoughts, any reflections, any personal experience that you'd like to share with the group?
I'm sorry. Do you have metrics for when you launch the employee giving or even the text to donate programs? Does it have to be a certain type of disaster impacting a certain number of people?
No. I don't have a matrix. My matrix is, our employees impacted, our customers impacted, our stakeholders impacted. I will say most of the time, one of those checks happen with every disaster. Pakistan is an example of where we don't have employees physically living there, but we have people who care, right? And who have connections back there. But AT&T, I like to say we're a global company, but when disasters strike, we're local. And so most of the time, even like with that typhoon in Alaska, it didn't check the first 2 boxes, but our stakeholders certainly. We're a highly regulated company. We have lobbyists everywhere, and they're asking, and they're working with government. And so that is something that is very important to them too. Yes.
Hi, Andy.
Hi.
Mazda Farajallah from the Western Union Foundation.
Yes.
I was curious about how does AT&T deal with donation fatigue, where at the beginning of the year, Ukraine happened, and I can imagine a lot of budgets went that way, that left very little in the bucket to give to other things, not just from a corporate perspective, but also from an employee perspective.
Great question, and that's real. I will tell you, and I'll get back to your answer. Hurricane Ian, Mitchell will know this, for such a large-scale disaster, it has not gotten the type of financial support or response that many disasters that have come prior have received. Please. Sure.
Nationally, we've raised $80 million for what we're doing for the disaster. It's going to cost us 120. And so on a scope for everybody, for all the other organizations and agencies that are doing this, we're way behind. And a lot of it starts with, it's sort of climate change. We used to be able to plan for hurricane season, for fire season, and then fire season. Oh yeah, how about the Marshall fires? 1,000 families, you guys.
So that is, when I showed that earlier number about the amount of disasters that have happened, so naturally there is fatigue. There is not even fatigue, but your budgets you can't keep up. So I will tell you how I manage my budget. is I have real conversations with, and I like to say, I'm business unit agnostic. I work with anybody and everybody in our company. They are my client when it comes to disasters in their communities. So in Florida, the conversation was, Andy, we need this much money to, respond to this disaster. And I say, well, okay, I understand where you're coming from and I feel you, but understand that we're still in Q3. I've got fires, I've got tornadoes, I've got maybe a volcano, those are things that I have to look forward to and unfortunately prepare for and plan for. So I will tell you that it is real in terms of how I manage my budget, and I have to be very disciplined and focused in terms of saying, look, it's Q1. I've got a whole season ahead of me. I got to be diligent, have a lot of discipline with my budget. But with employees, I think the Pakistan example is a real one. You put it in front of employees to let them make those choices, and you'll be surprised on how many people care and want to give back. I will tell you from our perspective, the Employee Relief Fund is part of our giving program. And so we, for Hurricane Ian, 380 employees, $250,000 so far in grants to employees. So that's adds to that, where should I give? So we always talk about, you can give to the Employee Relief Fund, give to American Red Cross, other organizations that are responding. We give them choice, but you're right, the numbers do and have gone down. You just can't respond to everything and give to everything. Yeah, please.
Thanks. Hi, Lauren Hornet with Wells Fargo. Nice to see you. So 2 questions. One really specific around the Employee Relief Fund that hopefully it's a quick and easy one, but is there an income limit or requirement for employees, like our threshold that they have to be under? And then 2, could you talk a little bit, and maybe that's what you're about to get to, how your position is structured within the company, and if you have a team, and how that kind of connects to like the CSR team and strategy more broadly?
Awesome. I'll try to remember. Okay, first, Employee Relief Fund. No, there is no limit or barrier in terms of if there's a need, there's a need. We do have like tiers to our giving in terms of if it is, if you are applying for a grant due to power outage and you just need to replace food in your refrigerator, that's obviously a smaller amount. To my home was blown away and I don't have any place to stay. So we also have secondary grants to that point. So if it's a catastrophic event to an employee, they are able to apply again, because I don't know how many of you know the kind of process of FEMA and the recovery, but it is slow. Think of it as an extremely slow relay race. The baton gets passed to multiple organizations, and it is it's difficult. And some would say it's broken. Others would say it's just injured. But but to your answer, there is every employee's it's on the need basis. It's basically, and I will tell you one thing that was really interesting with Hurricane Ida last year in Louisiana. We had a lot of employees who otherwise wouldn't have been able to get out of harm's way if it wasn't for the Employee Relief Fund. I was on the phone, and hurricanes give you some grace in terms of you kind of can let them know, prepare, and you kind of know it's coming. You don't necessarily, with the cone of uncertainty, know exactly where, but you can kind of get some prep out there. But we had some employees who otherwise would not have evacuated if it wasn't for the Employee Relief Fund. So telling them, hey, whatever expense you incur, gas, hotel, whatever, we've got you covered. We just want you safe. So does that answer that question? Second, I'm a team of one. I'm part of our corporate social responsibility team, which rolls up through our external and legislative affairs team. And so AT&T, like I said, is highly regulated. We have lobbyists everywhere. Their role is to kill bill, pass bill, and to get permits for digging up dirt and then going up into the sky. I don't envy their job. But when disasters strike, they're one of the groups that I work with the most because they're local. They are talking to government, local officials, and again, they're one of my stakeholders. I learned quickly, and it was my girls hate me when I say this all the time, but I practice what I preach, is you got to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. And so in a company like AT&T, and no matter what size company, there are people that you don't know, that you have to introduce yourself and share and explain what you do sometimes. So for me, when I first started, I was like, hey, you got some time? I'd love to talk to you about disasters and what do you got going on? And it was selfish, but also because I wanted to learn from them. They, like our team in Louisiana, they're pros at this, unfortunately. And so learning from them where the gap, what the successes were, and then also areas of opportunity. Those are all, I was asking them questions. Next, what didn't you have? What was an area of opportunity in the last storm? What can we do better? And so those are all questions I ask them. But like I said, here is just like I say, I'm business unit agnostic. I will talk to anybody and everybody. I had a meeting just yesterday with Operation Barbecue Relief, and they reached out and somehow they got my number and they were asking about FirstNet. So AT&T has a product called FirstNet, and it's there to support communications for first responders. Now it's expanded to extended primary customers like relief organizations like American Red Cross, Salvation Army, Operation Barbecue Relief. When they were down in Florida, communications was really difficult. And for them to get food out, it was a struggle. So they were like, hey, Andy, can you help me? I'm like, well, I'm not the guy to help you, but I know people who can. And so I put them in contact with FirstNet. So that's another example of how your company can expand your reach and scope, even if it's not part of my purview, but it's just also, I can connect them. You had a question?
Yeah, Ingrid from Global Giving.
Hi, Ingrid.
I am gobsmacked that you're a team of one.
Oh.
I mean, compared to our corporate partners who have sort of the same number of employees, I think we should talk about benchmarking and talk to your bosses.
Yeah.
Lauren, I wanted to tell you, E4E Relief and Emergency Assistance Foundation, their typical median donation for employees is $250. So it's pretty low if you think about it. So pretty small grant sizes. But I wanted to say that Global Giving responded to 230 different disasters last year in 117 countries. And that all flows through to your Benevity instance every
Yes.
night.
Yeah.
It gets refreshed. But our biggest, I think, issue with disaster is really whether it gets press or not.
Mhm.
So there are so many, as you know, Mitchell, so many disasters that just don't get that press information. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so we've created something called the Hope and Crisis Fund, which then will trickle down to the different ones. But what else can we do to help these people who really, really need help?
Social media.
Social media.
Please, sure.
Social media really is our best friend right now. And I'm not looking at just the crowd here in the room. I'm looking at your kids or your nieces and nephews. Tell the story, share the story. If we don't share the story, we can't rely on the media. So every little bit actually helps all of us. Every agency, every organization. Hashtags are a friend. I hope you're all using them today for the conference. That's it.
Yeah. And you're right. I mean, there are disasters. I don't know if you knew about the typhoon in Alaska, or there's I all of a sudden I get a call and I say, well, there's a tornado that hit Seminole, Oklahoma. That's an important neighborhood or community for us. What can we do to respond? And so there are, I mean, and that's where like general funds, like we are a disaster responder member for American Red Cross, or different kind of groups or funding that can help them respond to disasters that don't get the media attention. I mean, here in our own community, I think that the Marshall Fire certainly got a lot of attention, but the fire up in Grand County, we kind of forget. And that's natural, and that happens. I mean, there's disasters on that list that I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot about that one. And so I think the more we can utilize social media, I think the more that you think about your toolkit ahead of time so that you can respond in a timely and an efficient manner that's genuine, that's authentic, and it delivers impact. I think, again, part of, what I hope to share with you is, you can accomplish these things by being genuine and authentic and deliver impact. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Andy. So Christy Judd, Spark the Change Colorado. I would caution social media just a little bit because there's a lot of misinformation that gets shared. So when you're encouraging your employees to either post or share, follow the organizations that have the information, like the Red Cross, the Salvation Army, your local sheriff departments, the places where the information is going to be accurate and timely, because there's a lot of self-organizing happening that sometimes can be harmful. So social media is a great friend. It can also, cause a little bit of disruption, shall we say,
And that's-
already in a chaotic situation.
And that's super fair. And I also say, you don't have to be first. You don't have to, that was one of the lessons I learned right away, was the pressure from our external affairs team, our public affairs team. They wanted to be first in terms of getting the contribution out. They wanted to be first so they could get the press release out. And so I pushed back on that. Right or wrong. I mean, there are times when you do, it's obvious and you can get out there and share. And to me, it's not about it's not patting yourself on the back, but it's getting the word out and sharing and trumpeting the news so that others can follow your lead and help. But sometimes being patient and asking questions and finding the local organizations that maybe are best equipped to respond, especially in some smaller events. Sometimes being disciplined and taking your time and finding the right organizations to, tweet out. Ann?
Yes, my question speaks to really all utility companies. But is there some way that, and I know that you're highly regulated, all of them. Is there any way to add a tax onto people's bills for disaster relief? I mean, it's only going to compound. I know it's I don't know if it's something that has to be voted on, God forbid,
Sure.
But it's only going to compound. It's only going to get worse. And it's only if there were, a more reliable, systematic way to collect funds to do this and to put it onto people's bills. An extra 5
Sure.
cents a month.
I will say that.
I know that you think it's a great idea, and I'm going to echo my person who said, slow down on social media. No, most of your nonprofits are not government related. We're not tied to any government organization. We are truly a 501c3. So we represent our community, or in our case, the world. But the reality is, I would rather build a relationship with each and every one of you. And in the bill, in the AT&T bill, there could be something, a buck slip that says, would you give through this, as opposed to trying to tax your consumer.
I think Pacific Gas and Electric in California would say no, they don't want a tax. They've already they're responsible for a lot. But I hear what you're saying. I have a budget that I set aside that I have to offer for disasters in my programs. But I don't know. I don't think the public would be happy about that. Yes.
Hi, I'm Katie with Wells Fargo as well. And I'm curious when you've mentioned that you're bringing employees and things like that, what do you do around employee safety, whether or not, and volunteering versus voluntelling, that kind of thing? I'm just curious what your philosophies are around that at your company.
So someone asked me this. I was having a conversation with somebody earlier today, and they're asking what I did, and they were like, "Oh, so you travel a lot?" I'm like, "No. They don't need me there. Leave that to the professionals, the immediate rescue and relief. I can come in with recovery for the most part. Local teams have gotten involved with relief. I know Kentucky tornadoes, examples of, so we have retail stores, right? And so, they will hand out water, or they'll hand out hygiene kits, or they'll help with charging, or phones, so that, those who've lost their phones can actually start communicating with loved ones. But my role, I don't engage in terms of recovery work until probably 6 to 8 months later. It is a long, long path, especially for recovery. I'm working on other ways. And like I said, I'm always trying to learn more about how our employees can add value and how our company can add value. But for the most part, it's out of harm's way for 6, 8 months. Really quick, one thing while we're talking about organizations, I do want to share, literally, I'm not kidding. This is how, when I said, I got this call from my boss and said, my boss's boss was going to call me. I didn't know where to start. So I had heard about VOAD, Voluntary Organizations Active in Disaster, and I literally Googled VOAD. Then I Googled Colorado VOAD, and I got in touch with Ian, who's the chair, and started asking questions. And how does what are best practices? How do you work with companies? What are examples? How literally questions after question. And so VOAD is a great way to kind of know who's in your community, in my opinion, about who's active and who might fit with your company's expertise, your core values, locations. But I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that before the next question.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. Great presentation. Brooks Dozier with CoBank. And I was wondering, you were talking about using Benevity as your partner platform for employee giving. And I wonder if you could highlight the importance of having a partner like Benevity, and some of if you have feedback that your employees have given about having a tool like that available to them that's so dependable and so easy to use. Thank you.
Of course. And I think Benevity, and I think the Pakistan flood is a great example. Without that platform, that group of passionate employees wouldn't have had a vehicle to deliver through our company, through company matching and that kind of stuff. So I think it is a great way to show and amplify who we're partnering with. I think the question was, again, who are trusted and reputable organizations responding to disaster? We can put those up front to our employees as well. I think it's just to me, it's a great tool in our toolkit that really connects with our employees, that otherwise it's difficult to kind of, you can't email everybody. We talked, I think, talk about the F, I learned something new about emailing if that were in that presentation. We email too much and people don't read it. So, but I think that program or that platform really delivered in that example or that event more than I've seen before.
Just a quick note on Colorado VOAD.
Yeah.
Collectively, 100+ organizations belong. and they share information about who's responding actively and where to send donations to each of those organizations that are responding through a website called coloradoresponds.org. There's also a Colorado Responds newsletter that you can sign up for in times of disaster, and that'll get you very specific information here locally. Nationally, and even globally, the Points of Light organization is another great organization you could get in touch with for disasters around the globe.
Absolutely. With the Marshall Fire, fires are an interesting example of, I don't know how many employees of yours were like, how do we help? How do we help? And it's hard to find those kind of opportunities with a fire, especially. I like to, in those kind of cases, my guidance is there are so many organizations that are delivering exceptional support. Find those organizations, figure out how you fit in. If you don't right away, certainly after the cameras have gone, they're going to need your help. I don't know if I haven't seen the latest data, but I mean, only like out of 1,000 homes, only 100 and some have building permits and starting to rebuild. So you have all those families who are still in need of services. So the need it doesn't go away after the cameras have gone. And I also will talk about resources. We talked about, Hurricane Ian. Hurricane Ian, hit an area that, again, got a lot of publicity, but a couple years prior, Hurricane Michael hit along Panama City Beach and Lynn Haven and Mexico Beach and those communities. They didn't have the resources in that area to rebuild and recover on the scale that, say, like a Hurricane Harvey did. So when you think about disasters too, think about the resources that are in that community that are there to help them on that path of recovery. So that's why I like to say, and I like to partner with organizations that maybe they don't necessarily are household names, but they also are there long after the cameras have gone. Evolution of AT&T. So AT&T, I came to AT&T from the acquisition of DirecTV. AT&T was acquiring media companies, Time Warner, and I should say Warner Media and DirecTV. So at that time, our focus was different. Those companies are no longer part of AT&T, and our focus is on communications, back to our DNA. And digital divide is our focus. And so, being a good employee, I need to refocus and look at my partnerships and my programs to match that or to best fit it. So there's two organizations. One was a long-term with our global public affairs team, which is Telecom Sans Frontières. And the other one is Information Technology Disaster Resource Center. Both are communications nonprofits. TSF, they are working across the globe. A good example is with the human migration in Mexico. They have digital boards, information on how migrants can get resources and be safe. Actually, AT&T in Mexico has a call home program. We don't talk about it much, but where migrants can call home and to let their loved ones know that they're safe. Ukraine, on all the buses and then at the train stations and depots, TSF had signage and communications so that it could let refugees know where resources are and so they can connect and get the help that they need as soon as possible in their native languages. ITDRC, I first started working with them and it was during the pandemic. And that's a whole different kind of conversation about pandemic, right? And the work we did there and how we had to pivot. But they were delivering communications to, when we think about digital divide, our focus is and our thought process is it's a right, not a privilege. And so working to connect those communities, especially the most vulnerable, because those are the ones who suffer the most during disaster. During the pandemic, they were connecting communities, delivering hotspots outside of libraries or community centers that otherwise would have been full of children and community members getting online and doing the things that they needed to do. It's evolved. So during dark sky time now, they are placing charging stations. They are going and putting in hotspots. They are, I talked about our network disaster recovery team and FirstNet. They are focused on rebuilding our network and also delivering communications for first responders. But there's gaps. They can't be there. They're not there for everybody. Mayfield, Kentucky, the tornado there, ITDRC, I get a call from our team there, and there's a local pharmacy that was offline. They helped get them back online. Humane Society, lots of animals were brought there, but they weren't connected to chip animals to reunite them with their owners. So those are examples about, just small ways that like ITDRC can support the community and connects with our focus on digital divide. And then when I was talking about rebuilding, SBP, St. Bernard Project, when I first heard about them, I'm like, St. Bernard, how is that? I get the disaster thing, I think, but they got their start in St. Bernard Parish after Hurricane Katrina. And my first connection with them was we did a 24-hour build in Houston. We had volunteers working 24 hours working on Mrs. Brooks's home. And it was an awesome experience. It was just amazing the work that employees can do within a 24-hour period and shrink that time between disaster and recovery for her so she can get back into her home. And that was a year later. So that's where we started. And then the conversations have gone, well, what else can we do? They said, we've got all this information on our website. It's for, to help our clients be more resilient and prepared, and then also recover from disaster. But there's really not a way to get it into the most vulnerable populations, those impacted by the digital divide. So I had a conversation with our team and our tech dev team, and I said, you know what, is this something you could do? Can you help build an app? And our employees were like, oh my God, we totally want to do something that's fun and cool and delivers impact. And so we did. So if you want, and this will be sent to you later, but so that's called Equip. And it's an app that, we hope offers value. We hope it helps the communities. I will tell you, here's my plug, my guidance. Personally, and Mitchell probably can attest to this too, just take a few moments and do an inventory of your home. 400 pictures or 40 minutes of video. Walk around your home, outside, crawl spaces, open up cabinets, because that is one step that can help you accelerate your path to recovery and shrink the time between disaster and recovery. It's difficult talking to insurance companies and telling them all your possessions and what you had. If you don't have, it just helps put you in a better place. So Equip has resources and checklist in there. So I would recommend just taking a few moments. So that was my spiel. I hope it offered value. I hope it kind of gave you some thought. And I really appreciate, I love the interaction. I'm curious, questions, thoughts? Yes, please.
Hey, Andy,
Hi.
Sarah Hogan from Barefoot PR. Question, so we talked a lot about natural disasters, but I'm wondering if you can give a couple of highlights around how your response is different during man-made disasters.
Great question, Sarah. I will say, just like natural disasters, everyone is different. Our response to Buffalo on the shooting there, or last year in Atlanta, is different than, say, Uvalde. I'll talk about Uvalde because I think it's a great way of showing how relationships and how it can kind of open up opportunities to engage than you wouldn't have thought about. So Uvalde, ITDRC was asked to come down there and set up communications by the mayor and a number of different, like the Emergency Operations Command Center and other people. But then the bank called them. First Uvalde First Bank of Uvalde. They were getting inundated because they had a foundation that was set up. I couldn't give to them because it wasn't it was a bank, right? I couldn't give a contribution to them. But all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, but it became very clear that they couldn't handle the call volume. It was employees, and the employees were impacted. That's their community. So it was a very emotional experience. ITDRC said, hey, Andy, can you help? And so I reached out to our employees in San Antonio, also in the Uvalde area. And within less than 24 hours, we started taking calls. So, sorry. It was really hard, but it just shows that if you have those relationships ahead of time, and you'll never know how you can help. Otherwise, if we didn't have that our relationship with ITDRC, I wouldn't have been able to engage our employees. And we over 100 employees. I can't remember the hours. I apologize, but just tons of hours, and they were just answering phone calls, sometimes just talking, but otherwise it was just. So you never, I don't know if that answers your question, but sometimes it's just giving to a foundation that supports the families that were impacted. Other examples is a little bit more than that. Yeah.
You had it before I did. That's okay. I just wanted to throw something out. In a former position, we actually started what was initially started here in Colorado through the Animal Assistance Funds, the National Animal Disaster Funding Collaborative, which was a group of all of the national funders for animals assistance in times of disaster, where we had a common application, so that everyone who wanted to apply for disaster relief only had to submit one application. And then all of us reviewed those applications at the same time, which helped with the budget, because oftentimes great development professionals are going to ask everyone for $20,000, but only need $20,000. So we were able to negotiate amongst ourselves who wanted to fund what and when. It is a great opportunity to build those relationships with other funders in that time. And it also cuts down on resources of that poor development professional having to submit 15 grants immediately for a natural disaster. So I would throw that out there. If there are folks in development in Colorado that do this, start that up.
There you go. Thank you. Yeah.
Hi, Andy. Tori from Dish. So not everybody has the budget that AT&T does, and it's amazing to see, the amount of monetary donations that you're giving as well. Is there anything that you would recommend in regards to where you're finding budget and how your budget is increasing along with the number of disasters that are happening?
My budget is not as much as most. There are others who have, but I will tell you, I always use Dish is a great example. You have tools that can help organizations. You can run PSAs. You can develop PSAs for organizations. You can do some things that other companies might not be able to do, and it doesn't necessarily cost budget from you, right? And also engages a lot of other people in your company. I talk about too, my budget's not increasing, probably not. I'm not aware that it is. I hope it is. They're starting to talk about it. I definitely am sharing the numbers about the increase of events, but so that's where I try to get creative and try to find no cost, low cost. I'm always looking for opportunities to recruit employees to volunteer. Like ITDRC, again, it takes a special kind of technology, kind of not gift, but just experience. And so I have recruitment opportunities and share that kind of information. TSF, they came to me, or I came to them saying, what else can we do? And they're like, well, we got this grant from the Caribbean. I'm not going to mess it up, the acronym, but basically an organization that helps Caribbean countries increase their capacity and prepare for disasters in terms of their communication capabilities. So I said, well, we have an NDR team that's what they do. They can come and help educate and train this group. And so they're going to do that sometime early next year. It's supposed to be November. But I encourage you to kind of just think about what your assets are, what are your subject matter expertise, and just kind of think about, okay, what else can we do to help these organizations, and have conversations with them. I'm sure ITDRC would love, equipment, right? And opportunities to bring Dish Network into shelters or command centers. And so again, there is a cost, but it's not out of your budget. Yes. Yeah. Hopefully that answers your question, and happy to talk offline anytime. Am I out of time?
We're out of time.
All right. Thank you all
so
very much. And again, like I said, I started, literally Googling, so I'm happy to offer support, and I'd love to learn, from Dish and others, what you guys are doing, and so I can get better. So thank you for your time. Thanks for coming to Be Civic. I appreciate it, and have a lovely rest of your day.
Thank you, Andy.